Checkpoints is presented by pharmaceutical company GM Pharma.
Patti, welcome you to the show and thank you so much for your time. I use this opportunity to talk a little bit about the publishing business in the US, but the inspiration was definitely your book, Angel Makers. So please tell us a little bit about the book and how you wrote it. I mean, while writing, were you a journalist or a writer? How do these skills match each other? Where is the difference? So what type of book are we talking about?
Well, thank you so much for having me. I'm absolutely honored. I am a journalist, and this book is called The Angel Makers. It is about a midwife in Hungary in World War I all the way up through about 1930, who was using arsenic to give to her neighbor women, to use basically to kill abusive husbands. It was used otherwise for other purposes to kill other relatives, but that was largely what was going on for so many years. I found the story, I approached the story as a journalist. I've been a journalist for, I think, since I was born. I was living in Austria at the time in a small village right on the triangle where Austria and Slovakia and Hungary meet. And I found out about the story I was kind of traveling down the internet roads one day, and I saw a little piece about this odd event of these arsenic poisonings in this little Hungarian village. And well, that's not too far from me. So I have a neighbor at the time who was a photographer, and I said, Harold, do you want to take a road trip? And he said, yes, let's do it. So we went there, and I mean, it was life-changing in a way for both of us. It was a very profound experience to go to this village and to realize that everybody in the village is descended from either a victim or a perpetrator or both. And so that hit me as a journalist, but it also hit me as a human being, as a granddaughter, as a daughter.
Exactly.
With family members, it was very powerful. So eventually the story was written. I reported it as a journalist, and I wrote it as a writer. And I wrote it, people call it a true crime novel. You can call it a novel. I don't call it a novel, but it's written like a novel. You know, I compare it to the difference between a documentary and a docudrama. So I felt like since these women who did these deeds, such as they are, and these men who were killed, nobody's here to get at the emotion of it. They're long since dead. So I felt I needed to do everything I could do to try to bring back the DNA of this story.
Patti, how long did it take for you to understand your characters in the story first, and then to write it in such an interesting manner, right? Because this probably was also new, how to write it, how to portray these people that are long dead.
Of all the interviews I've done, I've never had that question. That's an excellent question. I first approached it, I felt really like a detective. There was a lot of information, and it was very complicated. And I had an assistant who was aptly named Attila. And I moved to the area where everything took place, and I hired English translators. But I approached it more like a detective, trying to piece things together, because I was just given boxes and boxes and boxes and boxes of information. And at some point it became kind of personal. I think I've sort of maybe lost the thread of your question, but at some point it became less like a detective and more like a responsibility to the truth of the story, the facts of what happened, setting the record straight. There was a lot of misinformation that traveled with these women up through the ages that I felt a responsibility to set the record straight. And the other thing was really just getting at the emotional nature as best I could. And that involved everything from speaking with criminal psychiatrists to look at everything I could possibly dig up, and also looking at their interviews with the gendarmes that took place before and after, part of their confessions, everything, just looking at the emotional makeup of the story.
And how much of your time did it take up? Because that's interesting.
The original question, yes, how much time did it take? Well, seed to fruit. So starting from the original article that I wrote to the actual publication date, which includes a different publisher, different editor, COVID, parents passing away, that took 14 years. Probably when I sort of boiled down the actual time it took to report and research and write the story, more like 8 years. But yes. That was 8 years. It was every day. And it was started in Austria. Then I had to go to England, and then I ended up back in the US. So it was 3 countries, several different cities. I just kept at it.
Patti, did you whose investment it was at the initial stage? Because you had to travel, you had to have like translators, as you mentioned. Mm-hmm. You had to talk to different people, travel a lot. I mean, was it your initial investment into the idea and into the story, or did you sell the idea and somehow then kind of like repaid the whole thing? Yeah. How does that work?
It was a combination. So how it works with nonfiction, usually how it works is you present an idea to the publisher, and the publisher, if they say yes, they give you what's called an advance, which more or less is like a loan. So it's an advance on what they think the book could earn, or a minimum of what they think the book could earn. But of that advance, you only get maybe 25%. So you don't really get the advance to do the book. So I got a percentage of the money, and then 15% of that has to go to my agent. So the real answer to that question is it was partially financed by me and partially financed by the publisher. I would say it was mostly financed by me. And that's not to say the publisher didn't have, mm-hmm. wasn't interested in doing it. But it was expensive. And it was expensive to pay for assistance. It was expensive to pay for translation. It was expensive to work on this because I'm working on it in a certain way to the exclusion of all else. It was not possible to have a full-time job at the same time as doing this. This was my full-time job. And then I tried to make money any way I could to otherwise support myself. Because of that advance, I only had 25% in hand. And then the book took a lot longer. So, 8 years is a long time. So it wasn't that much money. So at the beginning, it was helpful, but then it was looking at ways to kind of just make it happen.
How are now the sales going? And I know that you are going international because this book is being translated into different languages, in Russian as well, as I know. I mean, so please tell us these details, because these are also very interesting.
Yeah, so the book is doing fairly well. It unfortunately came out during the time of a marketing and publicity strike in the US by my publishing house, which is HarperCollins. And so that was not very helpful to have that situation. But despite that, it did well. It had great reviews. It was named the top 10 best true crime of 2023 by a major outlet called Booklist, Financial Times best summer read, Waterstone's best true crime. So in England, it came out simultaneously in the US and the UK. Different covers, but same story. In England, it's doing quite well. It's now in the paperback edition. It's being published in Poland. It was published in Poland and now Russia and in Brazil. So it's in Portuguese. It's in 3 foreign languages so far. And I think it's doing fairly well. I don't have a lot of insight into that. I get 2 times a year, I get insight into that. So it's I feel like I've got blinders on in a way because I don't have any sense of how it's being promoted in these other countries. But I hope it's doing well. It's
is it part of a deal, Patti, or why don't you have those insights? I mean, this is your baby book after all, right? 8 years of work.
Mm-hmm. It's just the way the industry works. Unfortunately, mm-hmm. You get these statements twice a year, and that's it. Mm-hmm. So. Yeah, I'm just.
What is the publishing ecosystem, Patti? I mean, you mentioned several people. You mentioned a publisher. You mentioned an agent. How does this mm-hmm. ecosystem work? And is it comfortable for an author?
Is it comfortable for an author? I can't speak to that. It's a challenging industry. In the U.S., you have different tiers of publishing, and you have traditional publishing, which is how I was published, and that's like what's called the big 5 publishers, and then you have like slightly lower, I wouldn't say lower markets, but smaller markets, and for those you need an agent, and so that agent will say, yes, I can try to, has some merit, let me approach some editors, and then the editors come to you. And they all have marketing meetings. It's very big industry, kind of maybe how Hollywood might run. You pitch it, and mm-hmm. they have to say, is there a market for this? Where is there a market for this? How much are we going to pay for this? So it's all kind of very commercial on that end. So that's the end I'm involved in sort of what's called the traditional publishing. I think in a certain way it works because it's controversial and it's changing. But it's helpful to have an agent because the agent can go through all the legal contracts. Is this a fair contract? They know the business. They know the editors that will want this. So I let them do their job. I want to do my job. I want to write a book and I want it to sell well. The agent is the one who knows how to all mm-hmm. the editors that they will do. So that for me is comfortable, so far it's working. So we'll just see how it goes.
Yeah. Also, Patti, I saw your tours, your book reading sessions. I was looking when researching for this interview, and they were going quite well in some areas. So, what is this process? Is it also an organized thing for you to promote your book, and is it kind of like set by the interests? I mean, what type of readers might be interested in this book, or is it up to you to have those book reading sessions?
That was up to me. Mm-hmm. Since COVID, the publishers are less likely to spend the money to send you out to these book events because for them it's quite costly. I wish they had paid for that. That would have been helpful, but. I booked those mostly. Sometimes it's a mix. But that was just working with the independent booksellers and doing my part in marketing, because even though the publishing house has a marketing department, my marketing department was on strike for most of the time that my book was coming out. So even if it hadn't been, I still would have been trying to do what I could to hustle to get my book to the attention of people, everybody I could possibly know. I'm not a big social media person. That's just me. But so I had to find other ways to do it, and really trying to work with independent booksellers, work around Amazon is great. Not going to say Amazon, but you really want to support these private owners who are trying to make a living off of selling books. And so that was always nice, because they'd welcome you into their events. And I mean, it's great because, I spent so many years just waking up in the morning and then writing my book by myself. So it was really great to be able to actually talk about this story that I couldn't really talk about before because nobody else knew the story. So it was really wonderful to meet with readers and to say, yeah, Auntie Susie, this midwife, wasn't she? Isn't this a crazy story? Yeah. And they're like, yeah, it was a crazy story. So yeah, it was really also very satisfying to understand how readers perceived the story, because sometimes they had insights that I had never had, and to see experience how they related to the story, which was very, very rewarding. I never imagined it would be so rewarding that that my readers would take to heart these people and to really feel their lives the way I felt them.
Yeah. Can we say that now this book is bringing like revenue for you? Is it a business in the sense that you might invest something, but then you are rewarded for your work actually from this standpoint as well?
I hope to see a return. It's coming close. But I hope to see a return because I get a percentage of the profits. It's actually the publishing house gets a large percent of it, but they do all the distribution. They do the distribution. They do the marketing. They place it on the shelves. So it's expensive. If I wanted to put a book out there myself, that's very, very expensive to get. So I hope that I am going to see a return soon. It's difficult days, but hopefully with a book that has been this well reviewed by the community and by the readers, I'm hoping that I'll see a return soon. I won't know. Like I said, every 6 months I get a statement, and if money comes with it, it's like, yes. Good. So most books don't earn out their advances. It looks like my book will earn out its advance, and that's I'm told that's good for a first-time author. So I just have to hope and see how it does.
Great. Is it a motivation for you to write another book, Patti, or do you need that inspiration? Do you need that story that you came across?
I need the story. Mm-hmm. I'm the one who has to sort of feel that connection to the story. I'm not necessarily looking for a story yet, but I have my sort of eyes and ears out for one that will come along.
And my last question, Patti, how does the copyright work now? I mean, who is the owner of the rights on this book? For example, if we wanted to translate it into Georgian, should we approach you or the publishing house, or how does that copyright thing work?
Well, you would approach the publishing house. Mm-hmm. If you need to approach me, then I would send you to the publishing house, HarperCollins. So in that works, it's called subrights. So they ask for the rights to reproduce this work. And then then the publishing house comes to me and says, do you want to give them the rights to produce this work? And I would probably say yes. For example, with Russia, I said yes under certain conditions. The publishing house, that it didn't have ties with government. That was the conditions under which I said okay. But yeah, so normally they would do that, and they would pay a small amount, whatever money they negotiate, they pay for the rights to publish. And then, for example, Georgia would certainly take care of who is the translator, and
Of course.
everything would be done on that end in terms of translation.
Well, I hope to see you in Tbilisi someday with the book. I would love to be part of your book reading session. I'm pretty sure it will be a wonderful, wonderful experience. And thank you for your time again so much.
Thank you. And hello to Georgia. I miss my time there. Hello, Rustaveli Street. Yeah.
That's
So,
where
all
our
those
office is.
wonderful. Yes, right. Okay. All right. And thank you. And I wish I remembered how to say thank you.
Madloba.
In
It's Madloba.
Not mud. Oh, no, I'm
Madloba.
going to mess it up. I'm going to mess it up. Okay.
Thank you, Patti.
All right.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. And I appreciate this.
The Checkpoints is presented by pharmaceutical company GM Pharma.